Hello YouTube, welcome to a new Natty or Not review. This one is about Alpha Destiny. I'm going to warn you right now, this video is going to be super long because the article is long. So I'm going to make sure I timestamp everything so you don't have to sit through 15 minutes if you don't feel like it. I'm going to try and not spend too much time on parts that are not important. But because the guy really wrote an entire encyclopedia about Alex from Alpha Destiny, it's going to take some time for me to dissect everything and debunk everything. Because the question of the article is, because it's an idea or not, is he natural or is he on steroids? So the article, and I suggest you go read it, I might put it in the description for you guys. It opens with a very poetic introduction that I think is quite well written, that actually has certain information that I do agree with, where the author basically explains that a lot of naturals end up in a cycle of hope and despair, meaning that they find that new training method, that new diet, that new fad that they think is going to make them big, and they follow it for month and month, and then they realize that it's getting them nowhere, and they despair again, they stop training, and then they find the next big thing. YouTube Fitness has made that cycle much more erratic and easy to fall into because there is an endless supply of role models, of supplement peddlers, of people who are going to want to become your guide, your role model, and you're going to want to follow them because they'll feel like your savior. They feel like they have something that they can add to your life. They can help you. They can make you bigger. The truth is, the only person who can do that is you. You can get some information from other people. You can grow some inspiration. But I've always said that inspiration is great, adoration isn't, imitation is bad, emulation is good. You need to make sure that you stay your own person. And they sort of go into the length of discussing that, where they say that natural people, they usually pursue their growth and they're very intense, they're super motivated, and then when they realize that you don't get big within a month, they start giving up. And just before they give up, they find a new thing that makes them feel better again, and the flame is rekindled, and they keep going again and again, but they keep doing that, basically. And this, of course, is not conducive to building a great physique. And he discusses also the fact that most of the time, the thing that is going to make them feel better and suddenly more motivated and energetic is going to be something new. Most of the time, things that are new, things that are presented as revolutionary on YouTube Fitness, either have existed for decades and decades, or they're not as effective as they're supposed to be. They're just a marketing scheme. Because we are conditioned to respond to things that are new. If I put out a video explaining that the secret to getting big quads is doing squats, no one is going to care. If I find out a brand new knee flexion with the bar behind me and bands hanging from my ears, and I have to do it in an angle of 45 degrees, that's going to sell. Like, some people are going to call me out and say that's BS, but a ton of people will buy it because people are very reactive and are very receptive to things that are new. This is why marketing is always trying to surprise us, because that's how they get our money. And they also speak about nutrition, the fact that there's always that one guy that says, oh, that one food is going to make you big, a secret for gains, which of course is nonsense. No food is going to make you big. Nutrition is not that important. Once you've hit the right macros, once you understand the foods that are healthy and that are going to make you healthy for the rest of your life, you're pretty much golden. After that, it's a calculation of calories and macros just to make sure that you can feed the gains. And he explains that a lot of people on YouTube Fitness, of course, tend to do that. Now, I'm not saying Alpha Destiny does that. I do think that Alpha Destiny is the type of man who truly believes 100% in what he does. I've been following him since 2015, so I've seen him go through all of those different phases where he will embrace something 100% and he will sell it to his audience. And I say sell it, but most of the time it's just videos, it's free. And he will present that as the solution. Of course he's wrong, right? There is no solution. There are things that are good. And I personally have learned from him a ton of things, like the weighted stretch for the traps, that's from him. The Olympic rings, that's from him. A ton of my unconventional ideas that I apply to my training come from that guy. I have to credit him with that. But he also has a tendency to run with certain things that are just 100% factually wrong, and that he will present as being the next big thing. He says, in his own words, that Alpha Destiny is a strong lifter, he's a YouTube personality, which he is. He's muscular, and he claims to have discovered the road to a high-level muscle synthesis that would only be possible with juice, which is true. I mean, Alpha Destiny called his program the naturally enhanced. He always talks about looking enhanced when you're natural, which at the end of the day should be the goal of naturals. If you're natural and you've been training for a while and people don't think you're taking products, you sort of failed. You should be so good that people think there's no way you could be natural. That's sort of the ultimate price. So that's the introduction of the article, where I'm sort of agreeing with the author, but it stops here because of course they're going to start entering that endless cycle of whining about the natural limit, and I'm going to start debunking them and making fun of them. So they start by asking, is he natural? And they describe his stats. So they stat him as 5'5", which, it's funny. There's that endless discussion, is he 5'5" or 5'6"? My take on that is, who cares? It doesn't change anything, it's an inch. Body weight, 80 kilos, so 176, so that's when he was bulking. Body fat, and this is the funny part, because again, that website and the guy who runs Natty or Not does not understand body fat percentages. He just does not. At this point, it's I was going to say it's worse than Blaha. It's not worse than Blaha. Blaha thinks he's 17% when he's obese at 30%. But this guy is still pretty far off. He says that because you can see Alex's lower abs and serratus, that indicates that he has 12% body fat. I have a news for you. These are muscles. You can build them. If they're bigger, they bulge to the fat and they're more visible. I have a full serratus visible. My obliques are fully separated from the six-pack. I'm still at 16-17% body fat. The only difference is that I have a ton of muscle in my core, and my body fat distribution is quite advantageous because it shows all of that. And it's the same for Alex. They use a picture to demonstrate that, where he has the tiny abs, you know, when you bulk and the fat is starting to cover everything, so your abs are all tiny and crunched. Like the picture I see here is not 12% body fat. It's at least 17-18, at least. So that's that. They are trying to calculate FFMI with a 40 body fat percentage. So there's a full 5% of body fat that is going to be counted towards muscle. And because it's much easier to put on fat, of course, suddenly if I can transform 5% of my body fat mass into muscle, I'm going to be into territories that shouldn't be possible for naturals. That makes sense. But it's not Alex's fault, it's the fault of the guy who doesn't know how to calculate an FFMI, which by itself is already a faulty method of telling if someone is natty or not. I've explained that in the Jeff Nippert video. After that, he again rambles about FFMI and blah blah blah, which again, it's complete nonsense. And he does say here that bone thickness, according to Alex from Alpha Destiny, is a major reason why the FFMI formula does not work, because it's not accounted for. I've discussed that. It's the thing about the wrist size where Alpha Destiny was 100% wrong. But the author of this article is using that as a straw man. You know, when you have an argument with someone and you know in the back of your head that there is one argument that completely destroys your rhetoric, and you don't want the opposition to use that, and you also know of a different argument that is sometimes used but that you can debunk, so that you usually tend to use that one, right? You throw it out there, you say, oh, well, people say X about my theory, but this is why this is wrong. This is intellectually dishonest, because you're trying to disamorse valid criticism by using a type of critique that you know you can counter. And of course, when you write an article on the internet, you can do that because you don't have an opponent. There's no debate. But as I explained, it's nonsense. You cannot do that. If you want to hear more about the wrist size thing, again, it's in the Jeff Nippert video. So I'm going to skip all of that because he goes on forever about that and it's going to save us times. There is a part where he sort of explains that Alpha Destiny is a little bit flimsy about his measurements, where he used to claim 6.5 inches wrists, and then miraculously it went to 7.5 inches, and Alex didn't really try and explain that. He just said, oh, they grew. Well, the big issue with that is, if you know anything about body fat, you don't have body fat around your wrist. It's a part of the body that doesn't really carry that. Same for your ankles. There's no body fat there. So even if you bulk, yeah, they're going to be a little bit thicker, but a 4-inch, that's not really possible. So yeah, I don't really know what Alex was thinking. That being said, you know, he started his channel, he was very young, and you know, we all make mistakes, right? He never lied to people to hurt them, I think. He just wanted to make himself look better. They explain also here that there are some studies that show that there is actually a way to make your tendons thicker for the joints of the fingers and the wrist, which involves rock climbing, which is very true. I know some rock climbers and they have messed up hands with gigantic fingers. If you want an example, you can Google Alex Onhold, which is the world's best solo climber, and his fingers are insanely thick. It's upsetting how big they are. A lot of that is due to the tension put on the fingers. I would also present the theory that all of the rubbing that you do against the rocks creates a ton of calluses that end up calcifying the fingers and the wrists, if that makes sense. But because you move all the time, it never really leads to arthritis. It's just there, it just gets thicker. And as far as training goes, yeah, your wrists are going to get thicker from training. That being said, I've always had thin wrists and they've never really gotten any thicker from training. The muscle do, which is a good thing if you like bodybuilding because it's going to make you look bigger. And after that, he claims that Alex doesn't have a skeleton required to break the FFMI calculator, which is funny. And also not completely untrue. If you have a big frame, you have more potential to carry mass. Now, whether that mass is going to be muscle or fat is not determined by how thick your bones are at all. It plays also into the role of the insertions of the muscles. And you can still have a lot of muscle mass if you have a small frame. I have a small frame. I have very narrow shoulders. That's my clavicles. Like the distance between my two fingers is my clavicles. It's super short, but I still have a ton of muscle on it. Just, it's a matter of hard work. Of course, it also makes me much less wide than I would be if I had wide shoulders. That's a given. And then they explain that the reason why Alpha Destiny claims that his joints have grown is because he measured them wrong, or they actually grew. Which, it's a conclusion like another. And then they ramble about the FFMI. That I hope that guy gets married to the FFMI because he seems to be really attached, and it would break my heart to see someone else with his bride. Blah blah blah. After that, they say that assuming that Alpha Destiny is 100% natural, what would happen if he decides to do a few cycles? Again, I explained that in other videos. You cannot think like that. You do not know the adverse effects on health that steroids might have on someone. For example, someone like me, my doctor told me in no uncertain terms that I have a strong predisposition for a certain type of disease that is genetic, and that taking exogenous hormones would potentially boost that so fast that I would potentially start developing it in my early 30s and die. So I'm one of those guys that it's like, it's not even, regardless of if I wanted to try it or not, I can't because I don't want to die. It's the same for Alex. Maybe he takes it and his liver goes bye-bye and that's it. No more steroids for him, no more nothing for him. So you cannot think like that. And also, this is an hypothesis. And for someone who seems to be so attached, to the scientific method, they throw in a random hypothesis all the time. You cannot say, oh, well, if whales had wings, then X would happen. Well, yeah, but X is completely dependent on if Y, the hypothesis, happens. So all of it is no, it cannot happen. And again, when I see Alex's physique, I don't see someone that's maxed out. I don't see someone that couldn't possibly get bigger. I could see him jumping on cycle and being just a gigantic meatball. I mean, he's 180. He was 180 at the peak of his bulk. That's not that heavy. I know that he's small, but I mean, I've seen people who were 5'5", 5'6" to be much higher in weight. They were higher in body fat as well, but they were bigger. And again, the reason why this makes no sense is because they say he's 12% body fat, and they keep saying that, oh, if he gained 20 pounds on the mild cycles, he would be 200 pounds still at 12%. Okay, you do not gain pure muscle when you jump on cycle. You gain a ton of water and fat. And if you mess up, which a ton of young guys do because they don't know what they're doing, you might end up just bloated. Like some guys I used to see at the gym that just, yeah, they got bigger, it's bloat. It's 100% bloat. You will never maintain the same body fat, gaining 20%. It's not possible. I mean, if you ask a pro bodybuilder, he will tell you this is not possible. Maybe if you did that at the very start of your lifting journey when you never worked out and you combined newbie gains and a heavy cycle, maybe. But that's not Alex's case. He's been training for 10 years, so that makes no sense. After that, they say FFMI 28 if he did that, but of course it makes no sense. And then of course, they compare him to Serge Nubret. I think Serge Nubret is sponsoring their website because they mention him a lot. Then Arnold, of course, again saying that Serge and Arnold were 5% body fat when they never were in their entire career, 5% ever. You will not find a single footage of Arnold at 5% body fat, ever. He never was that low. Same for Serge. It was the good old days where they still had a good layer of subcutaneous fat. They looked like complete monsters on stage, but they never showed up with striated glutes. They never showed up with striated hamstrings. They had flabby glutes. And I have no problem with that. I wish it was back like that. It's sort of starting to become like this again because guys are not conditioned anymore. But again, it shows that that guy doesn't understand bodybuilding and the human body. And also he says Alpha Destiny is a few cycles away from acquiring an FFMI that would classify him as an elite bodybuilder. Hate to say it, but even if he gained those 20 pounds of muscles, if you put him next to Arnold or Serge, he's going to get dwarfed because your size and your frame also matters on the bodybuilding stage. This is the reason why guys like Lee Priest and etc., who are giant killers, never really slayed the giants. They were never the top dog because when you're posing by yourself, yeah, you look great, but when you're next to a guy that makes you look like you're his son, suddenly it's not the same effect anymore. I know that might be unpopular, but it's a reality. A lot of people say, well, short people have better chances at bodybuilding to an extent, but if some 6'6" freak with good insertion shows up, it's game over. After that, they say that the diet of Alpha Destiny would make almost anyone fat. Because apparently he used to eat 4,000 calories with an emphasis on carbohydrates. I'm going to say that it does sound to be quite a lot for someone who's 5'5". 4,000 calories would make me gain weight at a very rapid rate. And I'm 6 feet. That being said, we all have different metabolisms. I have a very slow metabolism. He maybe has a very high one. After that, they calculate the maintenance calories for a man of Alpha Destiny's stature, which is around 3,000. Not thinking about the fact that Alpha Destiny does a lot of GPP, he runs, does a lot of that stuff, so those calories get spent eventually. And also, again, it's not against Alex, but people tend to exaggerate their calories all the time on YouTube Fitness. I don't know why. I think people think that it makes them look cool. Like, oh, you eat a lot of calories, so you're cool. I don't get it, but people do it. It's like the body, it's the reverse of the body fat. People lower their body fat percentages and they boost the calories they intake. Apparently, it's a good way to become a YouTube salary. And he says that yes, a 1,000 calorie surplus is going to make you fatter. Yeah, because your body is not going to transform that into muscle. But again, it's a straw man. No one is saying that Alex is doing that. He said that. So this is the epitome of what arguing has become nowadays. Like, people don't argue facts. They don't argue the quotes or the methods of people. They argue with themselves. Like, they invent a boogeyman and then they argue with that boogeyman who's really themselves, so they could just be talking into the mirror for all I know, and then they win. Wow, you won an argument against a statement that you made. Hurrah for you, sir. After that, they contradict themselves because they say, well, most people don't need calculators to comprehend that 4K calories will turn someone into a big fat lord. Alpha Destiny is not shredded, but he's not fat. So you put him at 10 to 12% body fat, but he's not shredded. If you tell me that someone is not shredded and not fat, I would think he's 15 to 16%. So which one is it? Again, contradictions, contradictions. And then they say there are only a few possibilities for the fact that he eats so much, which I don't think he does. He has so much muscle mass that he needs that to not lose any mass, because he would waste away without the calories because he has a very speedy metabolism. He provides a boosted number, which I think he did, or he burns a lot of energy, and they say it's unlikely. And I explained already why these three don't make sense, because it's based on skewed numbers. After that, it gets psychological. Alpha Destiny defends his natural status with right brain arguments. He cites a video of Alpha Destiny who explains why he's natural. And yeah, the explanations of Alpha Destiny based on that are that he does full body training, he has proper nutrition, he has special lifting tactics, which at the end of the day means nothing. I agree. But again, you're going to see that we're back into the Strawman territory. Why? Because they say after that dedicated training and nutritional plans are beneficial, and that even then there are certain people who do that but they don't have muscular physiques. Well, I'm going to tell you right now that if you've been training for years and you've eaten clean or actually properly for your own genetics for a long time and you don't have muscles, there's an issue here. Either you don't train as hard as you think, or you might have an hormonal problem somewhere, because you're supposed to gain muscle. All of that is basically they question the way Alpha Destiny presents his argument. I'm going to agree here that, especially in the past, when Alpha Destiny had his weird Italian phase going on, that he wasn't the most coherent individual. It was very easy to pick apart his arguments. So I'm going to just skim through that, because it's basically an attack on the form. And it's true that Alpha Destiny Alex used to curse a lot. He used to be extremely aggressive / emotional, which doesn't make for the best intellectual discussions. And it's easy to make mistakes when you're heated, or when you pretend to be. And they say that just because Mr. Destiny, as they call him, says that he doesn't look like a juice head, doesn't mean that he's not one. And then they ask, what is a juice head? And they then explain that because we see so many fake natties, we have an unrealistic idea of the natural body. And that just because someone isn't super lean, dry, veiny, and muscular doesn't mean that that person is not immediately someone who is natural. Meaning that you could still be small with a crab physique and be on the juice. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I will also want to mention that the opposite is also true. You can be big, you can be relatively lean, you can be veiny and muscular and be natural. And then they explain in very paternalizing terms that you need to put on a lot of mass, it takes a lot of years to get to a certain look, which I don't agree with, because they say it's not like you inject and wake up with an otherworldly body the next day. That's true. That being said, 3 months of a properly written cycle will make almost anyone look insane. And I'm not afraid to say that. There are some kids who are 19 who, if they decide they want to be on PEDs for life, will look better than me. And they won't have to put in any efforts because they decided that they are willing to sacrifice their health. Again, I'm against steroids, but I also recognize that they are super potent. They work. The reason why people take them is because it works. After that, they explain that there are fat powerlifters who have taken PEDs, who are on PEDs, and that therefore, just because you are not necessarily super veiny and shredded and ripped, it doesn't mean that you're not taking juice. Understand that this is the end of the argument, because they are basically opening up the window for what is unnatural so much that they get to attack basically anyone for being not natural. Because if you do not qualify for being natural, even if you don't showcase a very impressive physique, it means that anyone can be on steroids, meaning that no one is above suspicion, meaning that everyone is on steroids. I like this approach in a sense because for me, at some point, it's like, you can't prove your Natty status. Like if someone asks me, prove it, unless you're willing to pay for me to take the tests and to pay for my time, I'm not gonna have to prove anything because I can't. It's my word, that's it, that's all you have to rest on. And this is why the YouTube fitness situation is out of control completely. It's because the fake Natty situation has turned people into paranoid little lemmings. And it's not really their fault. When you've been deceived 15 times in a row, after a while it gets completely desensitized and you just stop believing anything, which is the state that that guy is. After that, they mention Coath Bloho. Very dangerous move. I don't know what they're thinking. They're gonna get snatched and grabbed. I hope that guy doesn't go to Costco to buy his jasmine rice, because, you know, if you meet Coath and one of those allies, first off, you won't be able to see anything else because he's so big. But that's the last thing you're gonna see, son. The last thing you're gonna see. So yeah, they're saying that Coath admitted to drug use and that he looks like a potato, which he does, and that's, you know, it's a sad truth. And then I'm not surprised that they seem to be a Bloho enabler, because that's just typically the type of person who watches that guy. It's people who have garbage physiques, but they want to be reassured that it's not their fault. And therefore, Bloho is perfect, because there is a man who's been lifting for 20 years who looks just like any random obese guy you can meet at Walmart. And on top of that, he's not natural. So that's perfect, because it shows that, hey, that guy has been training hard, he's been taking products, and yet he still looks like he doesn't lift. So if I don't look like I don't lift, it's not my fault. It's not because I don't put in the effort. It's not because I eat a tub of ice cream every day. It's because my genetics, they're bad. No, they're not. They're not. I have bad genetics for bodybuilding. I think I look pretty good because I know how to train. I know what to avoid to not look like a sack of mashed potatoes left in the sun. Okay, I'm not going to talk too much about that. I'm going to be making other videos about Coath. Don't you worry about it. No. And then they say that basically everything is deceiving, looks are deceiving, but the amount of muscle mass that one carries can never lie. Well, great, because we cannot tell how much muscle mass people carry. So we're back at square one. And then, there it is. They are doing what I've spoken about 10 minutes ago, where they know that the arguments are flawed. So what do? They present the counter-argument in a desperate effort to counter it before it's done. When people do that, they do so because that way they can frame the counter-argument in a way that is beneficial for them. They can take something that should actually trump them, but the way they're going to angle it is going to be in a way that is going to make their argument still superior. In which case, they say, a lot of people say that blah blah blah. No, that's not that. Basically, they say that most people think that if you don't have, like, if you're not covered in veins with every muscle fiber visible, then you're fat, meaning that you're in higher body fat. Well, of course, that's an exaggeration that serves our Strawman. They say that some people reviewed our fallacy that is on the fat side. Well, he's on the fat side for bodybuilding purposes. I'm on the fat side for bodybuilding purposes. If I stepped on stage right now at a natural convention or whatever, I would pull a Genova. I would be the fat guy on stage. I would be super happy and I would most likely dwarf all the other guys, but I wouldn't win. You're supposed to come in lean, right? But that's not what our fallacy is. He's not lean, he's muscular. It's the bear mode. Bear mode. Bear mode is different. And then they say that Alpha Destiny is not obese, which of course no one said he's obese. Again, an exaggeration so that their stupid argument looks less stupid. But anyone with two brain cells to rub together knows that you're the one who's making the stupid counter arguments. No one else is. And here we are, and this is why I like Alex. Because I've said a lot of things about Alex and you might think, hey, he doesn't like Alpha Destiny. No, actually, I really like him. In terms of YouTube, the fitness YouTubers that I like, he's in the top because I relate to him. And one thing I really like about him is that he doesn't believe that there is a natural limit, or if he believes it, he thinks that it's endless, which I believe in too. And they say that many people laugh at the idea of a natural limit and treat it as a topic that only losers bring up. Yeah, losers and beginners. Like, if you bring it up in my comments, I'm going to assume that you just started or that you got poisoned by YouTube fitness and people who are not willing to work hard. Because anyone else who believes in the natural limit, yeah, you're a loser. If you've been training 6 years or 5 years and you say, oh, it's my natural limit, I can never hope to be bigger than that. You're a wimp. That's it. Just admit it to yourself. You don't want to push the limits because it's tiring, it's a time investment, and that's fine. If you have other things in your life that you want to pursue and you like your physique and you want to maintain, do it, bro. Do it. I would do it. If tomorrow I didn't feel like getting bigger, I would be like, I'm done. I'm going to do something else. But admit it. Because the issue with those people is that they put these ideas in the soft brains of beginners who then start their journey with standards that are like right next to the floor. And of course, these people then have the same reaction because they have unrealistic expectations, but in the opposite direction that fake natties promote. Or they don't think anything is really possible. And that's not healthy. And then he says, you have to understand that the body has natural brakes that prevent protein synthesis beyond a certain point. That has never been proven. Again, that's the type of people that is going to use science when it is convenient, but the second that science doesn't really support one thing they say, they're just going to wing it. They're just going to hope that no one questions it. Where is the study that shows that training doesn't improve the protein synthesis of your body to the point that the muscular hypertrophy keeps on going with the amount of volume you do? Find me that study. Link it in the comments. It doesn't exist. The body is built to survive, not to satisfy your desire to acquire an aesthetic physique. The body is built to do whatever you want it to do. Simple as that. If you want your body to resist to cold, you go out in the cold. You're going to grow capillaries. Your veins are going to adapt so that you can survive. You know why? Because the body is built to survive. I can make an hour-long video about this topic that it's such a stupid argument because it's so easy to flip on its head because it's the crux of why there's no natural limit. Yeah, the body is built to survive. If you put your body under stress, the body is going to be like, hey, I don't want to break under that. Let me build more muscle fibers. And if you do it intelligently enough, it's like the frog in the pot. Your body is not even going to realize what you're doing. You're going to slowly force it to put on muscle. You think what? That the body is going to wake up on a Wednesday and think, I've been tricked. He's put on muscle. We're done. No more. No. You're going to do squats again. The body is going to be like, uh-oh, more weight. Let's put on more muscle on the squats, and it's going to continue forever. It slows down at some point because of multiple reasons, but it never stops. And I think I'm a pretty good example of that. And I'm going to keep exemplifying the fact that there is no natural limit on this channel. After that, they go straight for the jugular and they start talking about his size. They say that he's big because he's short. But they say that it's not an argument that they made, it's an argument that other people made. They say, where is the logic behind the statement? Being short does not make you a hypertrophy machine. Being 5'5" doesn't make you bigger than someone who's 6'2". You don't have a better capacity to build muscle. Blah, 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 blah. Thing is, when you film yourself, if you use the proper angles, it's really tough to see how big you are. You really have no idea how tall I am. If I didn't film myself next to my rack and you saw where I stand next to the rack and I just did this, how do you know if I'm 6 feet, 5'4", 6'4"? You don't know because the limb proportions doesn't give you enough of an indication for size. So if I'm standing up and I'm 5 feet, but I zoom on myself and I use a certain angle, who cares if I'm 5 feet? Suddenly, I'm going to look like random size. You don't know how tall I am. But the proportions of the limbs, the insertions, the fact that the limbs are going to be smaller and shorter because I'm a smaller and shorter man, they're not going to change. So everything is going to look thicker with a much more closed up angle. YouTube fitness is full of people who do that, and I have nothing against that. But there are a ton of short dudes that look much bigger on camera, but if you plug them next to someone who's 6 feet, they would look small. It's the reality of the situation, and Alex knows it. He's made videos about it. This is why I preach for tall men out there. Don't compare yourself to shorter men because they are going to look bigger faster, but you have more potential for size. And for a short man, it's going to take 3 years. For you, it's going to take 9. So don't give up. And I'm going to keep going because they ramble about that forever. After that, they talk about hard gainers. It does not exist. I made a video about that. And then they mention that Alpha Destiny believes that the physique of Zyzz is 100% attainable naturally. I'm going to skim over that because that's an old video by Alpha Destiny when he was still a kid. I don't think he still believes that. And of course, the physique of Zyzz was not attainable naturally. For multiple reasons. Not necessarily for the visual aspect, even though in a sense, yes. Most of the unattainable portion of his physique was the fact that he was 6'2". He got his physique in a few years. He wasn't able to maintain it with a random BS training program. Why? Because the PEDs were doing the work for him. That's what's so unattainable. You will not look like him if you train like him at his size. It's not possible. You will be a string bean because he didn't know how to train. I might make a video about Zyzz because I really don't like that guy. I think he was a terrible role model and he sprang an entire era of aesthetics that I think hurt a lot of young men, both physically and mentally. So I'm going to just go through that because they ramble about a thing that I don't necessarily disagree with. Then they say that Zyzz was weak. Again, size and strength are correlated to an extent, but they're not that important. Look at the weights I lift. I'm a weakling. You will find many people who bench more than me, who have a smaller chest. You're going to find a ton of guys who have like 200 pounds on my squat who have smaller legs. It's not as black and white. After that, they do say something I agree with. They talk about muscle quality. They say that you can outlift Zyzz, you can outdiet Zyzz, and that you will never have his muscle quality. The reason why is because he had good insertions. Yes, he had insane insertions. His insertions for the traps and the chest were the deeper I've ever seen. You will not be able to replicate that, which is the reason why when you train for yourself. You shoot for your best physique, potentially attainable. Don't try and do what something else did because it's not going to work. Picture what you want in your head, work towards that goal and make it happen. But don't look at someone else's physique. I would advise you to use a fictional physique, it's much better. Wink wink, videos about the topic coming eventually on the channel. And after that, they finish up with a conclusion, or rather it's not a conclusion, it's a three-part conclusion where they say, there is no program that can help you break out of the Natty prison. And they simplify muscle growth by saying it's a synthesis of extra protein. Then that the more you synthesize, the bigger you get. and that they basically explain that if you want that to happen, you need to have the protein synthesis going. And they eventually say, well, at some point your body will stop, meaning that there's going to be like a threshold of the amount of proteins that your body can intake, and after that, it's going to just piss it away. It's not going to use it for muscle building, which is wrong. It's a complete misunderstanding on the hormonal profile importance in natural bodybuilding, because that guy is a guy that was matrixed, meaning that his brain was completely shambled by pro bodybuilding and the people who take drugs, because they have made hormonal profile completely inconsequential because they control it with their syringes. But you and I control it with a different mean: food, training, and our mind. That's what we have. And once you understand that, you're going to realize that when you got bigger through all these years, it's not just that your muscles got bigger, it's that your hormonal profile also raised with it. It sustains itself. It's a symbiotic relationship. They both go hand in hand. And if that guy followed his own logic, he would realize that any gains he made was also accompanied by a gain in testosterone. The only difference is that he eventually stopped training or refused to push the training, which is the direct thing that causes an evolution in testosterone production. So of course, if you don't push yourself, your hormonal profile has no reason to keep pushing, because you don't break the muscle fibers to a point that is going to force the body to boost and promote protein synthesis. It's so easy to understand. After that, they discuss the bloat, the famous bloat. And they say that if you gain water, then you're going to look bloated, it's going to make you look bigger. I don't really care about that topic much. I do think that I might make a video about the